The first time Liana saw Adrian Kane, he wasn't supposed to exist. Not in her world of champagne toasts, diamond smiles, and the polished cruelty of her new family. He was a ghost, a rumor whispered in the marble corridors of the Voss mansion, a name her mother-in-law spat like poison. Yet there he was, tall, composed, eyes like storms behind a tailored suit, Claudia Voss's greatest enemy, her husband's greatest threat, and the man who would ruin her. He didn't touch her that night. Not yet, but the way his gaze burned through the room, the way it lingered on her left hand, on the ring that tied her to Damien Voss. It felt like a sin already written. In the empire of lies she had married into, Liana would soon learn that every truth came at a price, and loving Adrian Kane would cost her everything, her marriage, her peace, her name. But for the first time in her life, it would be her choice. Before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these powerful stories. Your support means everything. It helps me bring you more emotional, inspiring tales every single day. Now settle in, turn up your volume, and let's begin today's unforgettable story. The soft hum of violins filled the grand hall, weaving through the murmur of champagne and secrets. Liana Voss stood beneath a chandelier that looked as if it had been plucked straight from heaven, though she felt anything but divine. The dress was perfect, the groom was perfect, and the life she was stepping into shimmered like a fairy tale told through a haze of diamonds. Damien Voss, her new husband, was smiling at her the way billionaires smile when they know they own the world. Confident, polished, charming. His hand rested lightly on her waist, a gesture that said mine without needing words. She'd once found that kind of possessiveness thrilling. Now, surrounded by people who barely concealed their curiosity about the girl from nowhere, she wasn't so sure. They danced, the crowd clapping, cameras flashing, every move rehearsed, every smile calculated. Liana had grown up believing love was raw and unpredictable. But tonight, it was a performance, and she was the star of a play written by someone else. When the song ended, Damien leaned close, brushing his lips against her temple. "You're shaking," he murmured. "Nervous?" Liana forced a soft laugh. "Just overwhelmed. You'll get used to it," he said. Being a Voss takes time. Being a Voss. As if it were a transformation she had to endure. Across the room, Claudia Voss watched from a throne-like chair near the marble staircase, her posture so elegant it seemed carved from the same stone. She hadn't smiled once all evening. The queen of the Voss empire didn't need to. Her silence carried more weight than applause. When their eyes met, Liana offered a polite nod. Claudia's response was a sip of champagne and a look that could slice glass. "Your mother's." Intense, Liana whispered. Damien chuckled, oblivious. "She's protective. You'll love her when you get to know her." Liana smiled because she had to, but a quiet unease coiled inside her. She could feel Claudia's gaze like a shadow on her skin. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the city glittered beneath their penthouse balcony, Liana stood alone with a glass of wine, staring at the skyline. Damien was already on a call. Business never slept in his world. The hum of his voice blended with the city's pulse. She should have been happy. She was the new Mrs. Voss, the girl who had risen from nothing to marry New York's most eligible billionaire. But the silence pressed on her like a weight. Every breath in this house felt owned by someone else. Behind her, a soft chime sounded, a message alert on Damien's phone, left on the counter. She glanced without meaning to. Board call with A. Kane rescheduled. Claudia will join. The name lingered in her mind. Kane, she'd heard it before, hushed, tense, like something dangerous. The name that had once nearly brought the Voss company to its knees. A part of her wanted to forget it, to pour another glass and pretend she hadn't seen. But something in the air shifted when she whispered the name aloud. Kane. The city lights flickered against the window, casting her reflection beside Damien's. To people, worlds apart, tied together by love, power, and a mother who seemed to control them both. She didn't know it yet, But the man behind that name, Adrian Kane, would soon burn everything she thought she knew about love, and when he did, she wouldn't stop him. She's the perfect bride in a perfect cage, but the key to her freedom is a man her family calls the devil. Turn the page to meet the Iron Matriarch, and the first cracks in Liana's fairy tale. The morning after the wedding fell to still. The penthouse, with its towering windows and air that smelled faintly of money and marble, seemed more like a museum than a home. Liana padded across the polished floors, barefoot, coffee in hand, trying to remember the last time she'd woken up without someone watching her. Marriage to Damien had been a sprint, engagement parties, designer fittings, tabloids, and now that the whirlwind had ended, she was left with silence. She was scrolling through messages from old friends, congratulations mixed with envy, when the elevator chimed. She wasn't expecting anyone. Mrs. Voss? Came a clipped voice. Liana turned, nearly dropping her cup. Claudia Voss stood in the doorway, pristine in a white suit, diamonds flashing like frost. She didn't smile, didn't even greet her. She simply assessed her, eyes scanning the penthouse like a general inspecting enemy territory. Mother Voss, Liana said carefully, setting her cup down. This is a surprise. Call me Claudia, she said, stepping inside. We're family now. I prefer honesty over flattery. The words were sharp, but polite, like a blade hidden behind silk. I wanted to see how you've settled in, Claudia continued, her gaze gliding over the untouched breakfast tray. I imagine it's quite an adjustment. Coming from where you came from. Liana's smile didn't falter, though her pulse spiked. I suppose it is, but I'll manage. Oh, I'm sure you will, Claudia replied, strolling toward the window. Women like us always manage. We just need to remember who we are and who we owe. There it was, the warning beneath the pleasantry. Liana folded her arms, watching her mother-in-law's reflection in the glass. You mean who we married? She asked. Claudia turned, her lipstick flawless, her tone even. I mean who made us. Damien has a future to protect. His name carries weight, responsibility. The wrong kind of attention could tarnish things. Liana understood what she was saying. You're not one of us. Don't embarrass him. I'd never do anything to hurt Damien, she said softly. Claudia's smile was thin. Let's hope you mean that, dear. She moved closer, her perfume, something cold and expensive, filling the air between them. The Voss family doesn't survive on love, Liana. It survives on control. Remember that. Then she left, as suddenly as she'd come. The apartment felt smaller after that. Liana went through the rest of her day smiling for photographers, attending meetings she barely understood, and trying to play the perfect wife while Claudia's words echoed in her mind. That night, when Damien came home late, she didn't ask where he'd been. She just watched him loosen his tie, his eyes already distant, and thought about the empire he was chained to, and how tightly his mother held the leash. Before bed, she checked her calendar. An invite had been automatically added. Voss Foundation Charity Gala, co-hosted by A. Kane. Her breath caught. The name again, Adrian Kane. The man Claudia had warned Damien about for years. The man who'd nearly destroyed their company. The man she was about to meet. Claudia has drawn her boundaries, but fate is already crossing them. Next, at the Voss Foundation Gala, Liana meets the man her mother-in-law calls the enemy, and temptation begins to breathe. The Voss Foundation Gala was the kind of event that existed only for power, glittering gowns and perfect smiles disguising silent wars. The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers and camera flashes, filled with the kind of people who traded fortunes the way others traded gossip. Liana stood beside Damien, wearing a silver gown that clung like moonlight. She'd been dressed, painted, and rehearsed by Claudia's staff all week. She looked every inch the billionaire's wife, graceful, untouchable. Yet inside, she felt like glass about to crack. Smile, Damien murmured under his breath as a camera flashed. She did. She always did. From across the room, She could see Claudia floating between guests, commanding attention without ever raising her voice. Everyone greeted her like royalty, everyone except one man standing near the bar. Surrounded by silence, he wasn't drinking, wasn't smiling, just watching. Liana followed the subtle shift in Claudia's expression when her eyes caught his. It was small, but unmistakable, a flicker of genuine fear. The man turned his head slightly, and their gazes met. He had a presence that felt both magnetic and forbidden. Dark suit, dark eyes, and a stillness that made everyone else seem loud. Damien leaned toward her, unaware of her gaze. "Let's keep close tonight," he said. "Kane's here." Liana froze. Adrian Kane? Claudia's old nemesis, Damien said, keeping his tone light. "He'll make an appearance, just to prove he's not afraid of us. Don't give him attention. That's what he wants." But Liana couldn't look away. Adrian Kane, the name that had lived in whispers. The man who had nearly bankrupted the Voss conglomerate 5 years ago with a series of ruthless acquisitions. The man her mother-in-law had called a vulture in a tailored suit. Now, he was here, and he was looking right at her. When Claudia crossed the room to greet a senator, Adrian began walking in her direction. Every step seemed deliberate, the crowd parting subtly around him. Liana's pulse quickened. She turned to Damien, but he was distracted, greeting investors, laughing too loudly. When she looked back, Adrian was standing just a few feet away. "Mrs. Voss," he said smoothly. His voice was low, steady, and it rolled over her like velvet. "Congratulations! You wear the name well." It was not a compliment. It was a test. "Thank you, Mr. Kane," she managed, matching his composure. "I've heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you have," he said, glancing briefly at Claudia across the room. "I tend to linger in conversations I'm not invited to." Liana's lips curved despite herself. "Some people call that dangerous. I prefer honest." His eyes flicked to her ring, the one Damien had slipped on her finger just days ago. "I also prefer beautiful things that don't pretend to be something they're not." She should have walked away. She should have remembered Claudia's warning, Damien's casual dismissal. But something about the way he spoke, calm, certain, aware of every heartbeat in the room, made her feel seen for the first time since the wedding. Across the hall, Claudia noticed. The flash of anger that crossed her face was brief, but it was there. "Enjoy the evening, Mrs. Voss," Adrian said quietly, stepping back. "You're going to need to." And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving the taste of danger in the air. That night, when Liana returned home, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, the way he looked at her, as if he already knew what she was afraid to admit, that beneath the diamonds and the title, she was desperately lonely. She didn't know what Adrian Kane wanted with the Voss family. But deep down, she already knew he wanted something from her, too. 3 days after the gala, Manhattan was wrapped in silver rain. Liana sat in the back of a sleek town car on her way to the Voss Foundation's downtown office, flipping through notes for a charity project she was expected to oversee. It was mostly for show. Claudia handled everything. Liana's job was to smile for photographers and look useful. Damien had flown to Geneva that morning for a merger meeting. He'd kissed her cheek and promised to call, but she already knew he wouldn't. He never called when business was involved. The driver stopped in front of a glass tower that cut into the clouds. Liana stepped out, clutching her umbrella against the wind. Inside, the lobby gleamed, all chrome, art, and silence. "Mrs. Voss," the receptionist greeted. "Mr. Kane is expecting you." Liana blinked. "I think there's a mistake. I'm meeting Mrs. Voss." The receptionist's practiced smile didn't falter. Mrs. Voss asked Mr. Kane to discuss a joint donation. She couldn't attend. Her pulse stuttered. Claudia set this up. Before she could protest, the elevator doors slid open, revealing him, Adrian Kane. He looked even more dangerous in daylight, tall, composed, a hint of roughness beneath the tailored suit. He offered his hand. Mrs. Voss, Mr. Kane, she accepted the handshake. His palm was warm, deliberate. Let's talk somewhere quieter, he said. Claudia insisted I show you the proposal personally. They stepped into his office, a room built of glass and shadow. Rain traced lines down the windows behind him. He gestured for her to sit. I didn't know my mother-in-law trusted her enemies, Liana said, crossing one leg over the other. She doesn't, he replied. That's what makes this interesting. He slid a folder across the desk, filled with plans for a joint hospital wing, the kind of project that would earn public favor for both families. But Liana barely saw the words. All she could focus on was the quiet intensity in his eyes. You don't like me, she said softly. He smiled, the kind of smile that disarmed. I don't know you well enough to dislike you, but you know my name, she countered. I know your husband's, he said, and his mother's. I know how they play. And you think I'm part of their game? He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the desk. I think you're the only honest thing in their empire. And that terrifies them. The room seemed to shrink. The hum of the city outside faded until all she could hear was her own heartbeat. She stood, pretending to admire the view. You talk like you know me. I see more than they do, he said quietly. You don't belong in their cage, Liana. Her name on his lips made her turn. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because someone might believe you. He rose, stopping a breath away. Do you? She looked up at him, too close, too intense, and for a dizzy second, she almost forgot who she was supposed to be. Then her phone buzzed. A message from Claudia. Remember who you represent. The spell broke. I should go, she whispered. Adrian didn't stop her, but his eyes followed her to the door. You can pretend we're strangers, he said, but you'll think of this conversation every time you lie beside him. Her hand froze on the handle. She didn't look back. Outside, the rain had stopped, but her pulse hadn't. That night, she stood on the balcony of the penthouse again, watching the city lights. Damien had texted good night without a call. Claudia had sent her tomorrow's itinerary. And Adrian Kane, the enemy, had said nothing. Yet he was everywhere in her thoughts. When she finally slept, she dreamed of rain and the sound of a voice saying her name like a secret. The next 2 weeks blurred into routines of charity meetings, photo shoots, and Claudia's quiet surveillance. Every move Liana made seemed to ripple back to her mother-in-law. Every smile was evaluated like a stock report. And yet, beneath all of it, a current hummed, a pulse that had begun in Adrian Kane's office and refused to fade. He called once about the hospital partnership. His tone professional, but the pause before he hung up said everything. Then came an email, a question that didn't require her to answer, and still she did. By the end of the week, their messages read more like confessions than correspondence. When he invited her to tour the construction site for the new foundation building, she told herself it was work. Claudia herself had approved the project. What harm could there be? But the moment she saw him waiting near the scaffolding, coat dusted with rain, she knew why her pulse had already quickened. Mrs. Voss, he greeted softly. Mr. Kane, she replied. They walked the site together, half-built walls, echoing halls, the smell of metal and rain. He talked about blueprints. She pretended to listen. What she noticed instead were his hands, the way his voice dipped when he said her name, the way the world felt quieter when he looked at her. You ever wonder, he said at one point, what you'd be doing if you hadn't married him? She stopped. That's not something I'm supposed to wonder. But you do. She should have lied. Instead, she whispered, every day. He smiled faintly. That honesty is why they'll never understand you. The air between them changed, charged, delicate, impossible. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier. He reached for her hand to guide her beneath the half-finished awning. The touch should have meant nothing, yet her breath caught as if the sky had cracked. Liana, he said quietly. It was the first time he'd said her name without a title. She looked up at him, and the space between them vanished. His lips brushed hers, tentative, testing, and then deeper. as if both of them had been waiting for that single breath, for a heartbeat. She forgot everything: Damien's distance, Claudia's control, the weight of the Voss name. There was only warmth, the sound of rain, and the terrifying realization that this man saw her as no one ever had. Then she pulled back, trembling. "We can't." He didn't argue. "I know." But neither of them stepped away. The storm thickened, thunder rolling through the skeleton of steel beams. Somewhere above, the city kept moving, blind to the two souls hiding in its unfinished heart. When she finally left, soaked and shaking, he didn't follow. He simply said, "You don't owe them your misery, Liana." That night, she stood at her mirror, touching her lips as if to erase the memory. But it wouldn't fade. Damien called from Switzerland. She let it ring. Claudia emailed about a board meeting. She didn't reply. For the first time, silence felt like freedom and guilt. She slept in Damien's bed, but dreamed of Adrian's voice. Liana had always imagined betrayal as something loud: slamming doors, broken glass, shouted confessions. Instead, it came softly, in unanswered calls, in the quiet hum of a locked phone. In a hotel room far from the Voss penthouse, where she stood by a window watching the city dissolve in rain, Adrian was behind her, unbuttoning his cuffs, his movements unhurried. They hadn't planned this. Neither of them ever said tonight. But the moment their eyes met again, inevitability replaced words. "Say something," she whispered. "What do you want me to say?" He asked. "That this is wrong." "It is." He came closer. "And yet you're still here." When his hands touched her shoulders, she didn't move away. He turned her gently, his expression stripped of the careful control he wore in boardrooms. The air between them burned with everything they both tried to deny. She should have walked out then. But the truth was cruel. She hadn't felt alive in months. Not until him. He kissed her, and the world fell away. There was rain on the window, the taste of it on their lips, and a hunger neither could name. Later, she lay in his arms, the city lights scattering across the ceiling like a constellation built for liars. "What happens now?" she murmured. "Now?" Adrian traced a line down her arm. "Now we tried to survive the fallout." Liana wanted to believe survival was possible, but she knew Claudia Voss too well. Secrets didn't stay buried in her empire. They were dug up and displayed like trophies. The next morning, Claudia's call came at dawn. Damien's flight's delayed. Her mother-in-law said crisply, "We'll move tonight's dinner to Friday. Don't embarrass me in front of the partners." "Yes, Claudia." There was a pause. "You sound tired." "Be careful, dear. People are always watching." When the line went dead, Liana's hands were shaking. She spent the day pretending: brunches, fittings, charity calls. But the more she smiled, the heavier the secret grew. At dusk, she slipped into the penthouse alone, only to find an envelope waiting on the marble counter. Inside was a photo, her and Adrian at the hotel entrance, blurred but unmistakable. No note, no threat, just proof. Claudia knew. The next are blurred into panic, deleting messages, pacing the balcony, trying to breathe. When the phone finally rang again, she answered before it finished the first tone. "You think I wouldn't find out?" Claudia's voice was smooth as silk over steel. "My son's wife. With him?" "Claudia, don't bother lying. I don't care about your guilt, Liana. I care about what this will cost me." Liana's throat tightened. "Please, don't tell Damien." "Oh, I won't," Claudia said. "Not yet. You'll end it, and you'll attend the investor gala next week on my arm, smiling like the perfect bride. You owe me that much." The line clicked dead. Liana stood in the dark, shaking. The city below glittered like a cage of light. For the first time, she understood the kind of cruelty money could buy. The quiet, elegant kind that destroyed you without a sound. When Adrian called that night, she almost didn't answer. "She knows," she said simply. He exhaled, long and low. "Then there's no turning back." The silence that followed said everything words couldn't. They had crossed the line. They couldn't unwrite it. Outside, thunder rolled again, the same kind of storm that had followed them since that first kiss. She closed her eyes. knowing the next one would break something permanent. Can love survive when every secret is a weapon? Will Liana protect the man she loves? Or the empire she married into? And how far will Claudia Voss go to erase them both? The night of the investor gala arrived wrapped in glass and thunder. The Voss mansion gleamed with power, crystal, gold, and carefully chosen smiles. To anyone looking in, Liana was radiant, gown like liquid silver, smile unbroken. Only her hands, hidden behind a clutch, betrayed the tremor she couldn't still. Claudia hovered nearby, a vision of poise in black velvet. Every word she spoke to guests sounded like music, but every glance she cast toward Liana was a warning. Remember, Claudia whispered as a photographer approached, "We're a family. We perform." The flash went off. For a heartbeat, Liana could almost believe it until she saw Adrian across the room. He shouldn't have been there. The guest list had been curated by Claudia herself, yet there he was, calm as ever, talking to a senator as though he owned the place. When his eyes found hers, the world narrowed to a single pulse. Claudia noticed, too. Her expression didn't change, but her glass tilted slightly in her hand, the only crack in her composure. Moments later, she excused herself from a circle of investors and disappeared down the marble corridor. Liana knew she should stay, smile, pose, but instinct pushed her after the older woman. She found her in the library, lit only by the fire. "You invited him," Claudia said before Liana could speak. "Or he invited himself. Either way, you let him in." "I didn't know." "Don't insult me." Claudia turned, eyes cold as polished stone. "Do you think I built this empire by being blind? You've embarrassed my son, my name, my legacy." Liana's chest tightened. "Damien doesn't know, but he will." Claudia walked closer, every click of her heels deliberate. "Unless you disappear from Adrian Kane's life tonight, quietly, permanently, and if I don't, then I will destroy him first and you second." For a long moment, neither woman moved. The only sound was the whisper of rain against the windows. "Do you even love your son?" Liana asked softly. Claudia's laugh was brittle. "Love built nothing. Fear did." Then she brushed past her, leaving the scent of her perfume and the echo of her words behind. Liana returned to the ballroom, heart racing. Adrian was gone. The crowd buzzed with gossip, oblivious to the quiet war tearing through the house. Damien joined her, hand firm on her waist. "Mother says you weren't feeling well. Everything all right?" She forced a smile. "Just a headache." But as she looked into his kind, distracted eyes, guilt flooded through her. He didn't deserve this, yet she couldn't stop the ache that came with Adrian's name. When the gala ended, Claudia kissed her cheek for the cameras, whispering, "You'll thank me when it's over." That night, Liana found another envelope waiting on her nightstand. Inside was a single-page Adrian's address and a note written in Claudia's flawless handwriting. "Tell him goodbye, or I will." The city was quiet when she reached his apartment. Adrian opened the door before she could knock twice, eyes shadowed, shirt unbuttoned at the throat. "She's made her move," he said. "She's threatening you." He smiled faintly. "That's not new. Adrian, you don't understand. She'll ruin you." He stepped closer. "She can try." She wanted to be strong, to tell him it was over. But the sight of him tired, defiant, unguarded broke her resolve. "I came to end this," she whispered. "Then why are you shaking?" Because she already knew she couldn't. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "We'll find a way," he said. Outside, lightning flashed, cutting the sky in half. Inside, she realized there was no longer a safe way out. Can love outmaneuver a woman who built her life on control? Will Claudia's revenge end with Adrian's ruin or Liana's? And when the truth reaches Damien, whose heart will break first?
The headlines hit before dawn. Voss Industries under investigation for corporate fraud. Rival CEO Adrian Kane revealed as whistleblower. Liana's coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering across the marble counter. The sound echoed through the penthouse like a gunshot. Within hours, the Voss empire began to fracture. Stocks plummeted, cameras swarmed the mansion gates, and Claudia, Impeccable, untouchable Claudia was nowhere to be found. Damien burst into the suite mid-morning, his tie half loosened, face pale with disbelief. "She did this. Kane did this," he hissed. "He's been trying to destroy us for years, and now—" He stopped, eyes narrowing. "You knew, didn't you?" The silence between them answered before she could. "Liana," he whispered, "tell me it isn't true." Her throat burned. "I didn't know about the investigation, but you knew him." The words landed like a blade. When she didn't deny it, Damien stepped back as if she'd struck him. "God," he said hoarsely, "you slept with him." "Damien, get out." She tried to speak, to explain, but the air was gone. He turned away, phone already to his ear, voice clipped with orders, lawyers, damage control. She was no longer his wife. She was evidence. By evening, Claudia resurfaced. Her private car waited outside the tower. The driver opened the door without a word, and Liana climbed in, knowing she had no choice. Claudia sat poised in black, eyes cold, smile thin. "You did what he wanted," she said. "You handed him my empire." "I didn't know what he was planning." "No," Claudia replied. "You just gave him the keys." The city lights strobed through the tinted glass, flashes of gold and storm gray. "Adrian thought he could expose me, but he doesn't understand how much I've already planned for this moment. He'll lose everything by morning." Liana turned toward her. "You'll ruin him?" Claudia's lips curved. "And you, my dear, will disappear quietly. I've arranged a transfer, a villa in Tuscany. You'll leave tonight, before the scandal becomes too personal. And if I refuse, then I release the photos," Claudia said simply. "Your reputation dies, and Adrian's credibility dies with it. Everyone loses." The car stopped at a red light. Rain streaked down the windows. Liana stared at her reflection, a stranger with red-rimmed eyes and a wedding ring that no longer meant anything. "Damien doesn't deserve this," she said quietly. "No one deserves anything. They earn it, or they don't." Liana turned away, hand tightening around her clutch. Inside was her phone. She opened it beneath her coat, typing a single message. "Meet me. Midnight. The pier. One last time." Then she hit send. The city felt like an open wound when she reached the waterfront. The storm had calmed, but the wind carried the scent of salt and endings. Adrian was already there, coat unbuttoned, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and regret. "She's coming for you. She won't stop." "She already started," he answered, voice rough. "They froze my accounts this morning. Half my board resigned." "Then go, leave, get out before she—" "I can't." He stepped closer. "Not without you." Liana's breath caught. "She'll destroy me either way, but if I run, I lose the only thing that mattered. Adrian." "I didn't do this to hurt you. I wanted to expose her. The deals, the bribes, the charities that were never real. I wanted to end her, not you." Her eyes filled. "You can't separate us anymore. To her, I am you." He reached for her hand. "Then let her come." Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance, the kind that belonged to journalists, not police. The storm of scandal had found them both. Somewhere in the chaos, Damien was giving statements. Claudia was drafting denials. And Liana stood between two ruins, one she had married into and one she had created. As the wind whipped her hair across her face, Adrian pulled her close. She leaned into him, the salt from her tears mixing with the sea. "I love you, but I don't know how to save you." He pressed his forehead against hers. "Then don't. Just stay." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But when she looked up, flashing lights were already approaching through the mist. Reporters. Cameras. The end. When the empire falls, who gets buried in its ruins? Can love survive public destruction, or does it die under the weight of truth? And when morning comes, will Liana still have the courage to choose her heart over her name? Morning came quietly, the way storms end when they've already taken everything. Liana woke to the soft hum of the city below the hotel window. Her phone buzzed with headlines, messages, statements, all the noise of a world collapsing. She didn't open any of them. Adrian was gone. He had left before dawn, leaving only a note on the pillow beside her. "Don't look for me. Survive this. For both of us." She folded the note carefully, as if pressing a wound closed. The room still smelled of him, cologne and rain. Every part of her wanted to follow, to find him before Claudia's reach did, but she knew it would only feed the fire. Downstairs, a car was waiting. Claudia's, of course. The driver didn't speak. The silence was its own command. The mansion looked different in daylight, smaller, brittle. Reporters clustered at the gates, police stood at the drive. Inside, Claudia was seated at the piano, fingers resting on silent keys. She looked older, though her posture remained perfect. "You're early," Claudia said. "I expected you to run." "I thought about it, but running only makes me like you." Claudia's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. "They're calling for your resignation. The board's turning against you." "I built them. I can rebuild them." Liana studied her, this woman who had shaped empires and shattered hearts. "Do you ever get tired of fighting everyone?" A pause. Then, quietly, "Fighting is what keeps me alive." Liana nodded. "That's what I used to think about love." For a heartbeat, the room held two women who had both lost more than they would ever admit. Finally, Claudia rose. "My son filed for separation this morning. You will sign the papers, you will take the settlement I offer, and then you will disappear." Liana met her gaze evenly. "And if I don't?" Claudia smiled faintly. "Then you'll become a story, and stories are easy to ruin." Liana didn't answer. She turned and walked out, heels clicking softly against the marble, each step a goodbye. The city swallowed her again. By sunset, she stood at the pier where she had last seen Adrian, the wind colder now, the sky softer. The chaos around the Vosp Empire roared on. Investigations, arrests, statements. But here, the world was still. She sat on the same bench, holding his note. It wasn't fair, she thought, that something so rare could exist for such a short time, that love could bloom in the shadow of cruelty and still feel pure. She remembered his voice that night by the water, "Then let her come." And she realized he'd meant it, not as defiance, but as surrender. Maybe that was what love really was, not the staying, the letting go. Weeks passed. The tabloids moved on. The empire rebranded. Claudia retreated into silence, and Damien found new distractions in Europe. Liana vanished from the public eye, as promised, a ghost the city only mentioned in whispers. Sometimes, walking through the quiet streets of Florence where she eventually settled, she would hear someone laugh with the same low timbre as Adrian, and her heart would ache in that same quiet, impossible way. She built a life there. She painted again, something she hadn't done since before the marriage. Her hands no longer trembled when she picked up a brush. But some nights, when the rain began to fall, she would still reach for her phone, half hoping for a message that would never come. One spring morning, a small envelope arrived. No return address, only her name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a newspaper clipping from New York, an article about a new hospital wing funded anonymously through the Voss Foundation. The dedication plaque read, "For those who loved in silence. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't need a signature to know who it came from. She stood on her balcony overlooking the Arno, wind lifting the paper from her hand, carrying it into the river below. She let it go, not as loss, but as something finished. For the first time in years, she smiled. The world would remember the Voss scandal, but Liana Torres would remember something quieter. The sound of rain on glass, a man who saw her for who she truly was, and a love that lived only because it dared to end.